So by now, you should have completed your primary user and your stakeholder interviews. Your primary users and your stakeholders are going to have a list of wants and needs from these interviews that they're going to want to see in any product that has been designed and made. And obviously the majority of these are going to come from questioning and talking to your users and stakeholders, but also by thinking about necessary features such as safety, ergonomics and day-to-day usage, the things that you might call common sense. Now, there's a reason that we say wants and needs table. A want and a need are different things. A need is a non-negotiable requirement. That means it's vital that you're meeting all of these needs. If they said something needs to be a part of your design, it must be a part of it. So for example, if your user needs their product to be waterproof as it's for outside use, they wouldn't buy your product if it was going to fall apart. So it needs to be waterproof. A want, however, is something that is negotiable. So your user might want to see this in the product that you design, but only if all their needs are met. So a want is something that they would like to see, but isn't 100% necessary for them to buy the product. So for example, they may want it to be made from sustainable materials, but they wouldn't necessarily stop buying it if it wasn't. So what I want you to do to start is to recreate the following mind map. So in the middle, putting user wants and needs for insert your project here, and off to one side putting your primary users. I want you to do this for your own design brief, and around those primary users I want you to write as many wants and needs as you noticed during your interviews, and any that you might feel are obvious. So you should be aiming for at least 8 wants and needs. You can put more onto this table if you like, and at some point we can narrow those down to the most important ones. They may be specific properties such as waterproofing, or kind of wider things like it must be fun to use. So if it applies to more than one user, obviously link them up to save on writing. So on the next slide, I'm just going to show you some Access FMM if you haven't got enough wants and needs from your primary user interviews and you need to come up with a few things. So we're going to start out with aesthetics, the way things look. So think about your users. What might they want the product to look like? Might they want it to be colourful, sophisticated, customisable? The way things look is really important to a lot of people, and it may be that you can look at your user and think they're definitely going to want it to look a specific way. The cost. Think about how much disposable income, which is money after bills, that your user might have. Can they afford to spend a lot on your product, or does it need to be low budget friendly? Customer. Who is the customer? Now, this seems really, really obvious, but you should have identified this when picking a primary user. But have you really thought about who they are? For instance, an elderly person or child would want a product that is simple to use. They wouldn't want something that is going to hurt them, something that's going to be really complex. So really think about those users. Environment. So all products should realistically be environmentally friendly moving forward in today's day and age. But how is yours going to achieve that? We're told that plastic is always really, really bad, but sometimes it's the perfect material for a long-lasting product. An electric toothbrush, for instance, would be pretty poor if it was made out of cardboard. The size or the ergonomics. So how big should your product be for your customer to comfortably use it? You aren't going to make something giant for a child. You probably aren't going to make something with really fiddly bits for an elderly person. Have a think about that. Safety. Think about your users. Would they be able to safely use your product? What do you need to consider to make it safe? Now, we spoke about that briefly earlier and having a think about how small things might be swallowed by a child, or maybe some of the materials might be toxic. So really think about how safe your product is to use. Function. Are there any specific ways that your user needs this product to work? So are there any key features that might impact the way they go about their day? So if you take, for instance, my art storage, I might look for it to be adaptable. If it isn't adaptable for them to put different art materials in, then the function of it changes drastically as something that can be used by any artist. The materials. You aren't going to know the specifics yet. There's no possible way that you would. But are there any properties that it clearly needs to be? Should it be waterproof, soft, durable, flexible? Think about who your product is for and what they might need from the material. And finally, manufacture, the final M. So this one is more related to stakeholders, but I'm just going to go over it now so that you can kind of come back to this when you put your stakeholders in. So manufacturing, how would this product be made? What processes may be used and what are the impact of these to the stakeholder? Now, obviously, stakeholders are going to think about things like cost, how easy it is to make, how easy it is to transport, and that's something that you should be considering. So now you've done your primary users, I want you to add in your stakeholders. Now, you can do whichever stakeholders you choose to do, whichever stakeholders you've chosen to interview, but I want you to think about the interests that they may have that are different to your primary users. Try and aim for about 4 to 6 with these ones. So on the next slide, I'm just going to show you some very brief things that stakeholders might look at. This list is not exhaustive. They've only got a couple of examples for each, so you are going to have to think about a few. So you have different suppliers around here, like material and component suppliers might want it to be made in large quantities. Investors would want it to be well made but not too expensive. Retailers would want a product that looks good on the shelf, is popular and is a realistic price so they can sell lots. I will let you read through the rest, but there are plenty of different wants and needs that would definitely come from any stakeholder that you picked. So now you've done your primary user wants and needs and your stakeholder wants and needs, I want you to take a couple of different coloured pens or take a pen and draw some little different symbols, and I want you to either underline each of your branches or draw the symbol as to whether it is a want or a need. Remember, a want is something that is negotiable, a need is something that is non-negotiable. It's better to be clear about this now because it is going to help you later on with your wants and needs table. So, putting the table together. So what I want you to do on a brand new 1.3 slide is to create a table. Now the biggest you can do to start with is to make it 8 rows down. So we need to see 4 columns, which are the ones that are vertical, the ones that go up and down, and I would like to see 8 rows to begin with. These are horizontal, the ones that go left to right. In the title boxes, add the titles shown above, so number, who, want or need, and justification, and adjust the columns to similar widths as I've shown by hovering over these vertical lines, clicking and dragging them. You're going to need a total of 11 to 13 rows, so you're going to need to add some more to the bottom. So the first thing I want you to do is left click once in the bottom row, and then immediately in that row, right click and follow the steps on the next page. So when your drop-down box appears, I want you to look for a button that says Insert, and this is probably going to be on a horizontal section, not in the main tool window. Once you click that, a drop-down will appear, and at the bottom you'll see Insert Rows Below. I want you to click that, and you're going to have to do that 3 to 5 times to get the amount of rows you need, depending on if you're doing 10 or 12 rows. So now you've got your full table, I want you to add numbers into the number column. Obviously keep these chronological just for ease of use. The second bit along is to add your primary users and your stakeholders. I would advise adding the words primary user and the name of your user and the name or the company of your stakeholder. You can split these how you like between primary user and stakeholder wants and needs, but I would suggest if you've got 10 wants and needs, go for 6 primary users and 4 stakeholders, and if you've got 12 wants and needs, go for 8 primary users and 4 stakeholders. Your primary users are the main people that are going to be using this, so it should be weighted in their favour. In the next column along, the want or need column, I want you to start every sentence off with my product, and then after that you should pick either must or should. So my product must be waterproof. My product should be colourful. Must is a need and should is a want. Fill all these in all the way down to the bottom of your table, making sure that each one is different and that you're not replicating them. And the last box, the justification. So justification means to give me a reason why you've chosen that want or need. Why have the primary users picked that to be their want or need? So you're going to ask certain questions of yourself. So for instance, I've said my product must be waterproof. Why do they need it to be waterproof? What scenario might they be in that need it to be waterproof? Is there more than one reason? And I have found a couple of reasons by talking about the tools and the work not being able to get damaged, and the fact that if it's waterproof, the case is going to last for longer, which means that we're not going to need to replace it. That is a good and well-structured first part of the justification. However, I then want you to ask yourself, so what? And what I mean by that is, so what does that mean for my project? You've given me the reasons why your user has chosen the specific things, but have you asked yourself that question? Are there any ecological, cost, cultural, inclusivity impacts that this want and need would have on your design and product. You should try and get one of these for each of your justifications. So, for instance, for my waterproof one, I've talked about how things won't get damaged, the case won't get damaged. But then I've thought there's going to be a cost implication for this because waterproof materials are going to cost more and be harder to come by. So I've added that into the end. And similarly for my colourful one, I've talked about the environmental implications due to the increase in materials and products needed. These extra so what's are going to be the things that are going to push you into the top mark band because it shows that you have fully and completely thought about the reasons that your primary users and your stakeholders have picked those wants and needs. The last thing I'm going to say is make sure that the implication fits with the want or need and don't just use the same one for everyone. For instance, don't use cost or environmental for every single one, because if you use cost for every single one, it's not going to make sense and it's not going to push you into thinking about those really high mark band thoughts.